But I'm building a natural building. And, another thing about Humboldt is you imagine that, like, you come up here, like I've been here now like 7 years. You come up here and you think that everybody lives in a natural building and everybody's like riding their bikes and everybody's using reusable water containers. And it's like, no, it's like everybody everywhere else. It's not some kind of hippie haven or sustainability haven.
But we do have that branding of Earth First.
There is that feeling. Yeah. And so I felt emboldened to live the dream here. And so I'm not only doing permaculture, but I'm building a natural building, and I've started the Humboldt Natural Builders Guild. So the Humboldt Natural Building Guild, we started it a couple years ago, and we have, 20 members or so. And parallel to that, the Indigenous Habitat Institute. Have you ever heard of that? So Lisa Sundberg of the Sundberg family, Lisa Sundberg is heading up this Indigenous Habitat Institute, and they're focusing on hempcrete. And what we're doing on our project is what's called light straw clay. Those are all natural build kind of things. Very similar, actually. Hempcrete and light straw clay are very similar, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But everyone is like, okay, how's that going to go with building codes? And what we decided to do early on was permit this thing, to try to push the envelope, to say, yes, you can permit a natural building. You don't have to just do it off permit. And that's a lot of the natural building that we've seen, whether it's straw bale or cob or whatever. It's off permit. It's a bike shed. It's a sauna. It's something that's not necessarily needs a permit. And so we wanted to just grab the corn by the stalk and say, yeah, we're going to do a natural building and we're going to get it permitted and we're going to show that it can be done, and the county planning people are going to love it, and they're going to say, where's the next one? And hopefully we will have pioneered a little bit in the way we're doing that. So the Humboldt Natural Building Guild is kind of part of our Adventures in Permaculture. So if you are interested in finding out about this online, hashtag Adventures in Permaculture, one word, hashtag Humboldt Natural Builders, one word, and you'll come up with various stuff that we've been posting here and there about the projects here in Humboldt. So you're involved in some construction in your life, right? You've done some construction work, right? What have you done?
I've built sheds. I've roofed places. I haven't built any structures from the ground up. I've renovated, done small remodels, built additions on top of houses.
And see, that's all good. And I have absolutely no experience in any of that. So, tackling natural building was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to really try.
And the building process itself is challenging to get into. And I would imagine natural building is just another layer on top.
So we started with a greenhouse. So we built, when COVID hit, the county relaxed its code requirements for greenhouses. And they said you could build up to 400 square feet without a permit, because COVID, one of the impacts of COVID was it seemed like more people wanted to cultivate food. So they relaxed it. We jumped on it and built a 400 square foot greenhouse. And I wanted to, if you want to do like a natural building, a greenhouse is a little bit hard because the easiest way to do it is to use polycarbonate. It's kind of plastic stuff. So that's largely what the structure is. If you want to be a little bit more sustainable, shall we say, you could build it with glass, and that involves finding a bunch of windows. And some people have done that. Like Larry Goldberg up in Trinidad has a greenhouse similar size to ours, and he did it all with these big windows.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you can do glass, and you can even, as far as we're concerned, using salvaged glass is a great way to go because you're using materials that are already been produced. You're not, burning fossil fuel to make more materials. But glass is heavy. So if you have a slant, like we have a slanting roof that goes from 10 feet down to 6, and we're getting that solar gain thing going, you're just going to have a rough time holding all that glass in place because it's heavy. So you could do the sides pretty well because you've got more gravity holding them in place, but you still have to come up with the glass. You have to come up with the windows. And so we just kind of said, okay, we'll get polycarbonate, and we'll try to do all of the framing with second grade lumber, shall we say, either stuff we can salvage or resale lumber. Alv's resale lumber still sells what you might call knockoff. I don't know what the technical term is. Maybe you do. It's wood that maybe has knots in it.
Yeah.
It's not
grade A.
It's not perfect, but they've milled it. Somebody's milled it. You got
good enough for what you need it for.
Yeah. You got 2x4s that have got a big old knot or some ugly thing in it or a notch out of it. So we did all of the framing with that. We actually did get salvaged redwood to do the baseboard. So the whole base plate of the greenhouse is redwood, and we got that from a salvaged barn that Nature Joe, he used to be down in Redwood Acres. He's not doing his salvage yard anymore, but when he was there, he was, he'd go out and salvage something and he put it in his salvage yard and you can go buy it. And so we bought a bunch of lumber from a 100-year-old barn.
And old growth redwood is hard to come by nowadays. Yeah. People are holding on to that tight.
Yeah. And so I think that, conventional building, and you jump in with your experience, but, conventional building has its problems. One of the big problems is that there's a fair amount of toxic material, or, I don't want to use toxic in the sense that it's like hazardous.
It's not asbestos anymore.
Yeah.
But it's not great.
Yeah. There used to be asbestos out there. Who knows what there is now, but it's supposed to be better, right? But you have these foam insulations and you've got this fiberglass. You got different things that are, let's just call them nasty and not toxic, but, stuff that you really don't want to have to use or salvage later. A real good example is pressure-treated wood. I don't know if you know what they do. Do you know what they do to pressure?
They soak it in that chemical to treat it.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly why pressure-treated wood has all the lines in it, but that's how I can tell what it is. It has the lines. That's pressure-treated wood, and you can't dispose of that anymore. It used to be, pressure-treated wood.
Yeah, you can't take it to green waste. They won't take it.
Yeah, because it's nasty. So you have to specially hazardous material reclamation on the things.
And then what do they do with it? They probably still just bury it in some landfill somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know. As long as they are burying it in my garden, that's fine. But so pressure treated wood is a good example of the kind of materials that you have to use in construction that we would rather not. And another material that I want to avoid is concrete. And you may be aware of this, but the concrete industry is huge on carbon emissions. So globally, the concrete industry is about a 10% piece of the pie in terms of what causes carbon emissions. And that's heating this stuff up, in kilns. So to make the cement. So it's a big problem. And I wanted to lower the carbon footprint of the build. So how do I use as little concrete as possible? These are the kind of questions we're asking. Less nasty materials, less concrete. And the reality is you can't do without concrete because of building codes. So it'd be nice, but you can't do it. But you can push the envelope on products that are minimal. So we're going to be building this foundation with these big They're called fast wall blocks, come out of Oregon. They're like these jumbo cinder blocks that are only 15% concrete and they're 85% wood fiber, and they've done some kind of, lab thing, and they figured out how to make it pass code. So we're going to be using those, and our engineer says by the time we're done with the foundation, we'll have used about 50% of the cement or concrete that we otherwise would have. So, that's as good. So, a natural building doesn't mean that you're au natural, that was, in a sense, the way we used to do it. Humans used to, okay, what have I got? I'm cutting this tree down. I'm taking those reeds and making a thatching. And that's how humans developed shelter. We looked around at what was outside the cave and said, okay, can I build this? Can I build that? How do I string it together? How do I fasten it? How do I stabilize this? And as you know, probably in Humboldt, the indigenous people here dug into the ground. And so
I think we still have some of those places that they've built up at Sumac, don't they?
Yeah, have you seen
in the
that?
ground? Yeah,
Little
I've been
Sumac Village.
Yeah, it's really cool to see.
Yeah, you've been inside. You got to go in the
crawl
hole.
in through
and drop down in there. And so that was one thing that the humans here did was if they dug down, then they kind of had these walls ready to go, and then they just needed a roof. I still would like to ask a Yurok builder who I have yet to meet, but I'd like to meet one of these Yurok builders and ask him about water. Was water an issue? Because you'd think that
it would flood.
That the water would seep in from the walls if you've dug down and you're basically living underground. So how did they specifically pick a place, somehow figured out that it wasn't going to inundate? I don't know. I'd love to know that, but just keep in mind that it used to be simple. We used to build shelters, and then somewhere along the line, everything kind of became a business. This is my point of view, right? Everything is business, right? So now we've gone from just building shelters and living our lives to business and investments and resale, and so we went from shelter to this whole real estate market where now everything is looked at in terms of selling. You're going to have a house and you're going to sell it. You're not going to build a house and live there the rest of your lives and have your offspring for 10 generations live in that place. You're going to probably buy and sell 10 houses during your lifetime anyway. You're going to go from this to that. And
we have starter homes now. That didn't used to be a concept. This idea that
home.
Yeah, you're buying into a house, but it's not where you're going to stay long term. Yeah. This is just your first house of many.
Yeah. And that serves business and industry. It doesn't necessarily serve humans, but humans, we're always looking for the better job or this or that, and we're moving around a lot. And it's kind of crazy. That whole notion of we got to move all the time and we got to pack up and go here for the money and go there for the money. And we have to have our houses resellable to create this market, which, of course, is fueled by the mortgage industry, because none of us can afford these houses cash, so we have to borrow. And so they love it. It's a great system. Everybody's in debt. Nobody owns anything. I think the last time I checked actual home ownership, I own this free and clear, no mortgage, is about 18%. 20% of the population. Everybody else is renting. Everybody else is paying a mortgage. Everybody's paying interest. And I don't know, you have a mortgage?
No.
Yeah, don't get one. It's like I had a mortgage for 12 years. Didn't know what I was doing, but I thought, oh, let's buy a house. We're gonna live here for a while. So we buy this house, we get a mortgage, and they structure the thing. You see what the percentage of the loan is, and you're going, oh, that's a pretty good rate. But what they really don't tell you is that it's compounded daily. So it's not like, oh, I take the price of my house and I times that by the 5% that I got, and that's my interest. No. That's your interest every day. So it's like this compounding of interest. And then when you pay on a mortgage, your mortgage payment is structured in such a way that most of it goes to interest for the first half of the mortgage's life. So, you're paying, let's say you're paying $2,000 a month on your mortgage, and you look at your paperwork and it says you're actually only paying down about $200, and $1,800 is going to interest because the bank wants the interest up first. And then slowly, as you get to the midpoint of the mortgage, it starts to go the other way. And then by the time you're almost done with your mortgage, you're paying mostly, you're paying down and some interest. But of course, if you default, you don't make your last payment, bank takes it all.
Kiss your house goodbye.
Just like you never paid anything for it. So this system is crazy. Natural building is a way, I think, to try to think about shelter and housing economy differently. The investment is going to be me building a shelter, not whether I'm going to make money later in life or if I'm going to be able to sell it for more so I can buy something else. That's not part of my algorithm. I know that it's the American way, but I'm at the point maybe in my life where I'm just not going to be moving anymore. So this is it. I don't plan to sell. If none of my heirs want this house we're building, I'll give it to the UROC, whatever. I'm not interested in being part of the real estate mortgage market. We do own our property free and clear. So that was one thing we did to try to get away from the real estate market investment mentality and back to the shelter mentality. And I just wanted to mention just a little historical fact trivia for you, that building codes, in my view, building codes kind of serve that real estate market, because with building codes, you can say this is sellable, this is resellable. And so people have to keep it up so that it can be back on the market. But there was a time when that was not a consideration. And so if you go back into our history, I guess the first building codes ever in the United States were before we were the United States. We were colonies. In the Massachusetts Bay Colony, Boston had fire safety codes and roof requirements in 1625, and part of their building code in 1625 was no wooden chimneys will be allowed in Boston. Oh, really? So
how many people had to try that before they came up with that permitting process?
But in 1927, so you fast forward 400 years, in 1927, or 300 years, finally the United States starts adopting, it's the cities start adopting. So we're talking only about 100 years now of building codes as we know them, the uniform building code, and all the requirements that are in there. So when you come in and you say, well, I'd like to use light straw clay for the walls, and I'd like to use less cement for the foundation, and I'd like to do this, and I'd like to have lots of solar gain, and I want to insulate in such a way that I can warm the house and cool it without using a lot of heating and air conditioning. In fact, we're not going to use any. We're not going to have any heating and air conditioning in this place. When you start coming in there, it's like that's really not what the codes want. So what they basically tell you is get an engineer. If an engineer will sign off on it, then you're good to go. We need to have that assurance. We need to be off the hook. If you're going to do something weird, if an engineer says it'll work, then fine. So that was a big part of our story. I'll tell you a little bit later about the engineering. But I wanted to get back to some more of the principles of natural building. A big part of it is localizing.
Localizing
the material, localizing everything you can, the labor, everything you can. Like imagine you draw a circle of 50 miles or 100 miles. Everything in this house is going to come from that circle, if possible. So this is an example of where we went with light straw clay rather than hempcrete. So hempcrete is hemp herds with clay, basically. And every building that humans make is somewhere on the spectrum between fiber and mud. We're using some combination of fiber or mud. Maybe it's 100% fiber, like we're living in a tree house, or or straw bale. Straw bale is an example of you're using this sort of building blocks for your house, these big straw bales that are all fiber. On the other side, the mud side of the spectrum, you have mud huts or what we call cob. Cob is very trendy and people have heard of cob, and cob is like a lot of clay with some fiber. So cob way over here on the mud side, straw bale way over here on the fiber side. Somewhere in the middle, maybe even some more so on the fiber than the mud, is hempcrete and light straw clay. They're more fiber than adobe. Adobe and sort of Southwestern bricks, mud brick kind of things are way more clay than fiber. So somewhere more toward the middle, we've got these emerging materials. Hempcrete and light straw clay are a combination of a mud slip, a clay slip, and this fiber. In the case of hempcrete, we're using hemp herds, they call them. It's the part of the hemp that nobody's using, right? And in light straw clay, we're using straw. And so like one of the decisions we made, and we consulted with a guy named Michael G. Smith. You may have heard of Michael Smith. He helped found Cobb Cottages in Oregon. He basically wrote the book on natural building, and he lives in Northern California. We did some, early on when we first moved here, we did some Skype conferences with him. Very nice guy. I mean, if he could, he would be booked 365 days a year because everybody wants the knowledge that he has, and he's trying to balance his family and this and that. So he's kind of doing less and less. And getting him to come here and do like a workshop is just not going to happen. He's down near Davis somewhere. But he consulted us on Skype, and we basically determined to go with light straw clay because it's a good structural material for this climate. Straw bale is a little bit too much fiber for the dampness that we have. So we want to, if the more you're on the fiber side of things, the more you have to deal with water penetration. Way over on the brick side, you don't. But in the middle, what did we use? And so we decided to go with light straw clay. We can get straw locally. So that's hemp. You can't.
Are you going to be making these light straw clay compounds?
I'll tell you how it goes.
We'll get there. Okay.
Yeah, in a second. But so what I wanted to just get to is this localization idea. So I can get straw now. Hemp I can't really get now unless I want to import it from Canada or China or somebody that allows the cultivation of hemp. We have some limited cultivation of hemp in the United States for the last 10 years or so. When they were starting to liberalize on cannabis, they started to liberalize on hemp. But what a concept. Cannabis, marijuana got way more freedom than hemp did.
Which is crazy because you can't smoke hemp.
Yeah, it's considered a controlled substance still because it has some properties.
It's just associated with cannabis.
But, that gets all the way back into the whole business opportunities in the war over paper and hemp and stuff. So that's a whole history onto itself, why hemp was ever illegal in the first place. But, we used to I think the Constitution is printed on hemp, right? But somehow we managed to find somebody in business wanted to get that changed. But we can get the straw, and we can get the clay. I can get clay from my own property. Now, we're still trying to figure out if it's good enough clay. And the weird thing about it is I did an excavation pit on the north side of my third of an acre in McKinleyville, and it was all sand. So I thought, well, I don't have any clay. So then on the southern end of my property, I started putting in a stream bed where I'm pulling rainwater that's running down the street. I'm pulling it out, some of it, and I'm running it by my trees inside my yard. So I got a stream bed that takes it off the street and runs it through. And the rains, every time it rains, man, my stream bed fills up. It's really nice. My trees are loving it. And I'm digging in there to do this stream bed, and I'm finding clay. And it's less than 100 feet difference from where I was doing where the site of the house is going to be. So You never know, but it looks like we have a fair amount of clay. So we're going to be excavating our own clay, importing from somewhere nearby, somewhere in Northern California, the straw we need. And we're going to make the walls out of it. And that's localizing the materials. I mean, as much as we possibly can.
And for people that don't know, what is this structure going to be that you're building?
Okay, so it's a 2-bedroom house, small. We call it a cottage. It's about 1,000 square feet, and it's an ADU because the county is really interested in more ADUs, accessory dwelling units, so that granny flats and mother-in-law units or whatever. In fact, they're getting so generous with it that if you go and you pick out one of their plans for an ADU, you basically don't have to bother with the planning department practically. It's like they have to inspect, but they've got ready-made plans for ADUs right now. Say we will permit this right now.
Were you able to use one of those plans? No.
See, that's just convert it. When you can't. Yeah, it's when they have a ready to go plan. It's you do everything the way the plan says. So we had to go to an engineer. So we did, and we hired a guy that we found through the Straw Bale Association, California Straw Bale Association. He's in their directory. I think he's from Eureka originally, but he lives in Truckee. Great guy. His name is Paul. And he took the basic drawings that we had, and he had to do engineering on how is this going to do with earthquakes? He knows the code. How's this going to do on shearing and all the technical aspects of the structure being stable? And so he went through this, and he knows light straw clay. And so he's working on the light straw clay structures have what's called a Larson truss in them. Oh, I was hoping to bring this book I have. Here it is. There's a lady in Oregon named Lydia Dolman. Lydia Dolman wrote the book. Essential Light Straw Clay.
Literally wrote the book.
Lydia. So Lydia lives up in Southern Oregon. And so this is kind of like how to do it. And one of the things in Lydia's designs, and she's a licensed contractor in Oregon, and she's done these, is what's called a Larson truss. It's kind of like, the best way I can describe it is the wall has a ladder kind of in it with these rungs. And this extra truss, this extra kind of ladder structure gives more surfaces for the light straw clay to adhere to. So you're kind of buttressing. But what we're basically doing is we're making a clay wall. And the way you do that is you put up a form. So you've seen forms on construction sites. Maybe if you've ever done a foundation, those are these wooden things that they put in that you're going to pour the cement in, and then when it dries, you pull off the wooden forms. But the forms that we're going to have are going to be a foot wide, sitting on a foot wide foundation of these fast wall blocks. And so we take this foot deep box, in a sense, because we take this plywood, we put the plywood on the two sides, or the three, or I think two sides, and we take the straw and we mix it with the clay. We make a clay slip. It's been described as sort of like a salad dressing. So you take your straw and you dress it with this clay salad dressing, right? It's not supposed to be drippy. It's just kind of binding it together there. And you take this wet clay slippy straw and you put it into the form and you tamp it down with these wooden tampers, like just like the end of a 2x4 or something. You're tamping it down, and you're tamping it as hard as you can get it, and you're just compacting all of this muddy straw in these forms. And you're adding and you're adding. And then when those dry, eventually the forms come off and you have a wall. And of course, inside that wall are these Larson trusses and other things that are kind of maintaining its stability.
So you're still going to have like wooden support in that clay structure.
Well, we have framing. So everyone's seen framing. When you say a house is being framed, that's where all the wood stuff is there. So we're going to do that, and we're going to source all the lumber locally. And we're going to try to get as much like old growth, reuse stuff as we can. And we have a contractor who's going to help us. He's going to do most of the framing. And so he's scouting for local materials. And he's going to build a frame, and it's going to look pretty much like any house would look. It's wooden frame. It's just going to have these Larson trusses in it. And then we're going to come in behind him and build the walls. So instead of putting up plywood and putting up sheetrock and putting up insulation and whatever, we're going to use, I think we're going to use rock wool insulation. And then we're going to build these foot-thick walls and plaster them with lime plaster. So lime is a mineral. We're going to be able to get some from Northern California here. I think Redding has a lime place. We're going to make the plaster and plaster the walls, and that's gonna be it. That's going to seal in the wall.
Interior and exterior, you're going to coat it in?
These are exterior. The interior walls are just going to be
that clay
framed.
Okay.
They're not even going to be light straw clay. They're just interior walls. They're just going to be framed with some plywood or something, whatever. And we'll plaster it, I'm sure. We haven't kind of thought about what the interior side is going to be, but it'll probably be a plaster. If not lime, then maybe an earthen plaster of some kind. And we're going to have a regular floor. There's been some talk of should we do an earthen floor? Some people do like the special techniques where you can kind of build a floor without wood, and you just keep layering on, and you maybe top it off with like a linseed oil or something, and you have an earthen floor. And we're just kind of not going to do that, but we're going to have kind of a regular subfloor thing and go from there. So the light straw clay walls are kind of breathable. They allow the air to get through, but not the water. And it's going to be the kind of thing where when it gets warm, the walls will breathe. It's almost like it's a self-regulating material. And so the idea of building something out of wood and sheetrock and insulation and stuff, and then having to turn on air conditioning or heating to make the atmosphere livable. No, we're going to actually build a house that kind of does that. And we'll probably use we're going to use some heat maybe in the dead of winter inside, but the idea is it's well enough insulated that it won't take much. So again, when you're talking about natural building in today's society, we mean as natural as possible, in a sense. One other example of that is we're going to do a cold room instead of a refrigerator. So the northwest corner of this house is going to have no windows and is going to be insulated differently so that it stays really cold.
Do you have to build into the ground for that, or are you going to build it?
No, I don't think we're going to build into the ground. We're still, the jury's still out on that one, exactly whether the ground will help warm it up or not. That's kind of what it comes down to, because you have that geothermal effect. We don't want the subfloor to be warmer than the room. So we're still working on that one, but the idea being that we won't have a refrigerator in there. Now that we're not going to be able to have frozen stuff, and God, the American diet is completely dependent on frozen stuff.
A lot of frozen foods.
But, and we have some frozen, right? We have a refrigerator now, and we have a little one of those top freezer things. But we're trying to transition out of that so that we have as little freezing. We're used to not freezing, and we're used to just cold storage, and eventually putting it in the cold room, like a cold pantry. So
and you'll be able to keep meats in there as well?
Well, we don't eat meat.
Oh, well, there you go. That solves that issue.
That's part of it too. We want, in terms of sustainability, we want to be able to sustain ourselves. So if you want to eat meat, that's fine, but you got to figure out where you're going to get it. And if you have neighbors that have, whatever, cows or pigs or chickens or whatever you eat, you better make friends with them and see if you can get some of that. Now, of course, there's a whole array of regulation about the slaughter of animals and the selling of meat and this kind of stuff, and it's very complicated. I mean, you can't even sell raw milk.
That's where I was thinking.
Yeah,
as you were talking about that,
because sustainability is kind of like not legal. You have to have all these rules and regulations so that everybody can go to their store instead, throw up their hands and go, "I'm going to Safeway. Forget this." But that will come to an end, and people will need their neighbors and what they can produce more. And so we're, in a sense, designing a house of the future. So we won't be needing a refrigerator. And so those are some of the elements of it. Any questions so far?
No. So you guys have broken ground on this, but you haven't started building.
I'm going to invite you to the groundbreaking. What we're going to consider the groundbreaking is when we finally dig in for the foundation. So we have this guy named Orion, really cool guy. He's, I have to say, I don't know what your experience in the building community here is, but it's very difficult to find anybody who's really into natural building or even green building. It's kind of like, you'd think that was like par for the course, but if you go, like, say, Google green building in Humboldt or natural building in Humboldt, you get very few results. And what results you get are often not people who are really doing it. It's people who are really doing something else, conventional building, but they'd like to do more of this green or sustainable or whatever if they could. The problem is no one demands it. So if you wanted to become a contractor and say, "I'm going to be doing light straw clay houses, I'm going to be the greenest builder in town," the question would be, who's going to hire you? Because it's way easier just to do conventional. And everybody already has done conventional. They've been doing conventional building in here since 1850. So everything is already kind of nasty. And where do you find someone who has a fresh plot of land that they're going to build something new on, and it's going to be new, it's going to be natural, it's going to be sustainable? Not very often. So when we were looking for a place to live in Humboldt, one of our criteria was we wanted to find more land, less house. Was kind of that flies in the face of real estate. Everybody wants more house and less land. And the houses around us, we're in McKinleyville. McKinleyville's a very mixed area. They've been kind of building it for, 100 years or 200 years or whatever it is. And it's hodgepodge. So where we live was once a farm, was once a, cattle ranch or something. In fact, there's a place called Halfway House that was on a street called Halfway. And we live off of Halfway as well. So Halfway is, people go, "Where's Halfway?" It's that street that runs from the airport down to the high school. So if you're up at the airport and you see you're going towards town on on Airport, you're going towards Central, there's a street that says Halfway. You go down there. And I guess it was a stagecoach stop at one point. Maybe you were halfway to Trinidad. I don't know exactly the origin. There's an exhibit at the museum over here in downtown Eureka about McKinleyville. And there's actually a place that was called the Halfway House, which is now gone. And so we're going to be the new Halfway House. But where was I going with that? I digress too much. We're really excited.
Builder, yeah.
We're really excited.
I'm surprised you were able to find anybody to tackle this project.
Yeah, it was hard. Like, so one thing that's hard is that people in the building industry are busy, and they have been busy forever since we've been here. It's like everyone's going, oh yeah, well, it's really busy now. And you can't get people to build, or, they're the ones who are building are all busy. When we were first starting this project, they were building a conventional house next to us in McKinleyville. It was a quarter of an acre. We're on a third of an acre. It was all part of this farm at one point. And he wants to build a rental. So he's a home builder and he's a landlord. So he builds this thing. Takes him about almost 2 years to build the thing with his own little crew. And when we were asking him questions, the guy next door is building. We were asking him questions, and it was like, I got to wait 2 years on that. I got to wait 2 years on that. It was like really tough. And then you throw in the idea of, can you be like natural about it? Can we be as natural as possible? And people are just kind of like, I don't know if I have time for that.
Yeah, what does that really mean?
So it's been kind of tough. But let's say on the foundation, we're not going to pour a slab. There's basically two kinds of foundations. There's a slab, which is a big piece of concrete. That's the most. And that's the cheapest because it's the easiest. You just build one big form and you pour all this concrete in it and you let it dry. There's your foundation. Slab. Maximum amount of concrete, minimum amount of labor. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to do a perimeter, the other kind, which is like a stem wall. So it's just around the footprint of the house, 3-4 feet of concrete, but ours is going to be a foot thick. Our perimeter, our stem wall, which is quite a bit, maybe twice as thick as most stem walls that houses sit on. But we're going to use more material and probably the same amount of labor. But we're going to use these fast wall blocks. And so we've got the blocks. I got 3.5 tons of fast wall blocks in my side yard ready to go. And when Orion comes, he's going to excavate the trench for the perimeter, and he and his crew are going to put these blocks in there. I'm not going to personally do it because I would die trying to lift one of those fast wall blocks. I mean, it's like I'm already struggling to pick up cinder blocks. But if you ever want to help, by the way, I'll let you, because I think you
might have a little strength.
You might have some buff left after your illness. But so we're going to break ground. We're actually going to have a little party when we do this. I will invite you.
Oh, cool.
And there are a number of people that want to learn these skills. They want to learn natural building. Some of them are really interested in permaculture. Some of them haven't heard of permaculture, but they've heard of natural building, and the other way around. So they're like these two partners in a dance, permaculture and natural building. And so there's a lot of interest, and we have a number of people who say, if you're going to build these walls, you're going to need people to tamp and mix straw and clay. And so we want to learn. We want to be there. So that will be the first opportunity, probably sometime in mid-April. We'll do the groundbreaking.
That's the plan.
We'll start this foundation process. Although we won't be building the light straw clay walls, we're going to invite everybody from the Humboldt Natural Building Guild to come and take a look, and we're going to have some workshops along the way. And we have to learn to do this ourselves because this is the first time we've done that. We've been involved in making some natural building things. We've moved some straw bales for people. We've done some light straw clay tamping in workshops and stuff, but we've never built our own house with it. So finding a place where there's land to build your own house is a little bit hard. So that's a challenging thing, but we looked for over a year
to find somebody,
to find some place that had room for a natural building. And again, it's the modern real estate market is you got this big house and you got this strip of grass around it, and that's your house. No land. So when you're looking, you got to be looking for some kind of crazy thing like what we did. We found this crazy thing. God, thank you, God. It was a really old modular home set on a third of an acre. And people have been living in this thing for 40, 50 years. And I guess at one point there's like, meth cookers in there. I don't know what it was, but it was, it's kind of on its last leg. So hopefully it'll stay long enough for us to get something else built before it collapses. But, we have had to live in this, in a sense, substandard little place, for like 7 years now. We weren't expecting to do that. But if you can find a place where there's a temporary shelter where you can live, or some people, maybe they have a tiny house or an RV or something that they park on it, and that's where they live while they're building. But that's a tricky one. But we were able to do it. It was like a godsend. We found this thing, 1/3 of an acre in McKinleyville. I don't mind saying that the price of the property was $137,000. It was like, oh my God, they needed somebody to be a cash buyer because the place has no value. The structure has no value. We pay hardly any property tax on it because the structure has no value, but we're like going land. So we jumped in there with the proceeds of the sale of our house in Colorado, and we bought the place from a guy who's moving to Colorado. So we are not responsible for raising the population of McKinleyville.
It's a clean swap.
It's a clean swap. So we got that land. We were looking at like, can we get 2 acres somewhere? And we had we had these design criteria. We had about 25 of them that we were looking for. That was the only one that we didn't get at this site in McKinleyville was the size. We were looking for something like 2 acres. Now we know 1/3 of an acre is fine, because what would actually happen if you had 2 acres is you'd have enough time and strength and resources to work about 1/3 of that acre, and the rest of it would be wilderness, basically, which is fine, but we don't need that other acre and 2/3. We've got plenty to do on 1/3. So we are doing that. We built the greenhouse with Alex. Alex is a musician, and in fact, he's was a pretty hot bass player in reggae bands and stuff, and he played for some pretty well-known bands. But now he moved to Montana, so I'm mad at Alex, but he did a great job of kind of giving us the basic, teaching us how to build the greenhouse, because he did a lot of the building, but I was out there learning. And I got the tools I needed, so I got the power driver and the saws and this and that I would need to build the greenhouse, and I learned all that from Alex, and that was great. And we've kind of created a team with this cottage in McKinleyville, we're calling it. We've got a nice team, an engineer. This contractor will do this contractor will do that. We got a guy named Lizard doing the plumbing. Lizard's very well known. He was an earth firster in his younger days. And so he's going to be putting in the stuff that brings the sewer and water from the street. And so it's a nice team effort. And hopefully by the next time I see you, when you come to the party, we will have the first permitted light straw clay house in Humboldt, groundbreaking.
It's a big title. Is this going to have like modern electrical wiring work? Or what is your plan for that natural lighting?
So you have to do that. You have to do that. You have to have solar. These are things that you have to do because everyone assumes you're going to sell this. So you've got to do this. If you don't do it, then you can't sell it. And so, I mean, if we had just gone in and we were just building this on our own without any permits, if we ever tried to sell it, then
you'd run it.
They would come in and nobody would buy it. They said, well, this is unpermitted.
It's not up to code.
We can't buy this. So, I mean, we could technically have built something and not worried about it if we're not worried about resale, but we wanted to try to pioneer a little bit. So we're going through the permitting process, and so far so good. It's been McKinleyville Community Services District has been very helpful because they run the sewer and the water, and the county so far has been good. And I went over there before I came here just to try to iron out some things. We've got water, sewer, and electrical coming in, and it comes in from the front and goes all the way to the back because the ADU is going to be in the back. So we have like one kind of 100-foot line that comes in once you get off the front of the house branch. Then you go back about 100 feet to the house, the new house, and we got water, sewer, and electrical. Is it possible to do that in one trench? Or do we have to have 3 different trenches, one for the sewer, one for the water, and one for the electrical? So we're working with the people who are the inspectors, the ones who have the code, the ones who say, if you do it this, I have to sign off. I will sign off. So McKinleyville's been good so far. County says, fine, no problem, we'll do it. So,
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Do you know what the cost difference would be where you're building this with green materials as opposed to conventional? I would imagine it's more expensive, but significantly or not quite?
That's a good question. And I can't tell you because I haven't bought everything yet. You could go out and you can try to find what is the average cost per square foot to build something now. You could probably find an average cost per square foot for California. You could probably find a national average for the cost per square foot. And it's all over the place. You just don't know. What we're trying to do, in some ways, what we're trying to do is spend less on materials and more on labor. And if we can, of course, do a lot of that labor and we can have our community of natural builders help, then we can cut some of the costs on labor. So in a sense, we're trying to cut costs on both materials and labor. Will that happen? I don't know. When we get this foundation done, I can tell you whether it would have been cheaper to do a fresh concrete pour. I'm guessing it probably would be. There's a good chance that just calling up a concrete company and saying, here's the ditch, pour into the form, you're done, might be a cheaper way to go. But for us, the cheaper way is the problem. We're all given incentives to do things the cheapest way possible. We're all in the eternal quest for cheap. And a lot of times what's cheap is not good. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for humans. It's just cheap. So we're going to make some trade-offs. We've already spent quite a bit on engineering that if you were pull the ADU plan off the website and say, put one of those down on my land, we would have been done by now. But the engineering, it was a significant cost. But when that permit was turned in, the county just put, good, looks great. Didn't have any pushback on anything. So we're full steam ahead.
Do you know what the average lifespan of structures like this are?
You know, what is the average lifespan of any structure? Hard to say. My observation, having kind of been living in houses for 60-some years, is that they're cheaper all the time. They're falling apart more all the time. That the house I lived in when I went to kindergarten is probably still there. And the house that I lived in when I sent my kids to kindergarten probably has fallen apart. Everything is cheap. Everything is fast. And I don't think that the quality is out there in what you're seeing
now. Oh, it's
now.
definitely not from back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that in the wood. Like that old gross redwood, there's a reason it's still coveted today. It's because it's a much higher quality of wood than what you can get.
Right. So, and another problem with longevity is that will this structure last for 100 years? I won't be around. You won't be around. No one's going to know whether it lasts. I can tell you this. The Romans were able to build a Colosseum that's still standing. I mean, it's a ruin, but that's partly because nobody was maintaining it. But
which still says something that even not maintained, it's still pretty damn good.
Yeah, the Romans had some pretty darn good construction skills, and the Egyptians. And so we can build stuff that will last. I think attention to materials and putting some love into it is going to help. You know, it's the thing you have to worry about is slapping something together, which seems to be kind of par for the course in most construction.
Yeah, the
You're
status quo
getting it
today.
done.
Build it fast and build it cheap. And then sell it. Move on to the next project. Well, I'm excited to see this.
Yes, and do come.
I'm excited for the proof
Everybody
of concept as well.
who's watching Nick's podcasts, stay tuned. You can come too if you want. You can reach out to Nick, or you can contact us at adventuresinpermaculture.com, adventuresinpermaculture.com. If you go to that website, there's a tab for Humboldt Resources, and in the Humboldt Resources page, there's a way to read about the Natural Building Guild. And you can join, sign up, and get notifications on what's going with natural building there.
And I know we talked about this a little bit last time, but is there anything in the works for documenting this build on your site, or maybe some videos on the process?
Well, that'd be nice. I need you to bring your video camera.
Take some videos.
Because, all I got's a phone, but we're writing about it, but, I really don't have the gear for a nice video, but that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little supplemental material on there for people to watch.
Yeah, I want you to come.
Yeah.
Bring your camera when you come, and
we'll take some shots.
We'll have like some shovels, and we'll all be like those Chamber of Commerce groundbreakings. We'll all be standing there.
You'll have to get a big ribbon.
I wonder if the McKinleyville Chamber of Commerce will loan me the gold shovels. I wonder. That'd be kind of.
You should ask them.
Yeah.
Bust those suckers out.
Those spray painted.
Get some use. Okay. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Nope.
I think we're good there.
I think we're good. Have a great day. Have a great spring.
Enjoy the sun.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.